Okay, welcome everybody. It is 1 o'clock, so we are going to start because we only have an hour, and so we're going to start. And I think my name is Sarah Boad. I'm Treasurer of ALDC, but I'm also a Warwickshire County Councillor, and I shall be chairing the session today. And I will be saying, after all the other speakers have spoken, I shall put my 2 pennyworth in at that point, and then we will move to questions. A reminder that there are some pastries left and some drinks at the back, so do help yourself to those if you would like. A reminder that this is a member-only session, so looking around, you all look like Lib Dems to me, but just making sure there aren't any, I don't know, Daily Mail reporters or press or whatever in here, to say this is very much a members-only session, focusing on the countdown to the county council elections in 2025. This session is being recorded by Lib Dem Podcast. I'm just going to hand over to John for 2 seconds to talk about that before we then go on to the rest of the panel.
Thank you everyone for turning up. My name is County Councillor John Potter. I also produce and host the Lib Dem Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. I have to say that. It's kind of in the contract. But obviously we'll be audio recording and filming the panel. If any of you want to ask a question but are terrified about your voice being heard, do let me know afterwards. I can remove that. We're not doing it live. It is edited. But as Davina used to say on Big Brother, please don't swear. Okay? Right, lovely. Enjoy the hour.
Okay, so I think the county council elections coming up are going to see, like we have with Will, lots of places suddenly, and the same in Warwickshire, suddenly with MPs and success, and then we need to build on that for the counties. I think the counties are probably the most difficult elections every electoral cycle, because most of us are used to working in our Warwick district or Stratford district or South Cambridgeshire district or whatever, or Woking, wherever it is, and suddenly you're having to work with people that you probably don't see very often, sometimes over 8, 9, 10 district councils all working together. Coordination really, really important. And our panel today, we've got a council leader, we've got other of us with very few councillors, others with medium number of councillors. We have an MP who's a county councillor. So we have a real mix of people. They're all going to speak for about 5 or 6 minutes each, and then we will throw it out to questions, and hopefully we can get as many of you in who wish to speak in that time. Right, okay, so the first person I'm going to call is Will Forster MP. And first of all, congratulations to Will for getting elected.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all. So I'm a county councillor in Surrey, and I've been a county councillor in Surrey since 2009. But something happened on the 4th of July that now means I've got the letters MP after my name, which is delightful. Despite being an MP and about to step down from being a councillor, I'm still going to have a huge focus on campaigning and local government. I think May's county council elections are a historic opportunity for the Liberal Democrats. We can make a real difference in our communities, both at a county level but also in the divisions we want to represent. And I think it's a historic opportunity for us because actually we're going to be running against a Labour government who is already quite unpopular. You've seen what's happened recently with the winter fuel allowance. They have already sort of lost the goodwill of the country, and in particular in areas like John is going to talk about, that presents us a really good opportunity to go forward against Labour that has been a challenge over the last couple of years. And then in my areas, an area like mine, actually in the south, the Tories are still disliked. I almost want to say hated, but certainly disliked, that we can still beat the Conservatives. So we've got this great, great opportunity to do well. And that's against the backdrop of when these elections were last fought, and that was in 2021. And that was a very strange year. You had the set of elections in 2020, which were borough, district, metropolitan, put on the same day as county council because of the COVID pandemic. We had barely any time to campaign in 2021. We weren't allowed outside, let alone to knock on doors. I remember having campaigns meetings where we were talking about, well, we're going to have to sit at home and pay the Royal Mail to deliver leaflets for us. That was a very difficult set of elections. In that set of elections, the Conservatives had a COVID vaccine bounce. The Labour Party under Keir Starmer were actually really unpopular then, and Labour lost a lot of seats and councils to the Conservatives, particularly in the north of England. We as a party made some modest gains. We went up 8 councillors in the country. 8. And that was in all the set of elections combined. So it wasn't an amazing set of elections for us. We've now got a great chance to go forward. Back then, we won control in no overall control of 2 councils. Oxfordshire, which I know Neil and some others did, and then Lucy in Cambridgeshire. So we do run 2 county councils, which is great. So, you're quite right. So I'm seeing the 2 here. So we do run some county councils, which is absolutely great, but they're in no overall control. There are a lot of county councils that we now have more than 1 MP, sometimes 2. So we've got Devon, we've got Cornwall, we've got Wiltshire, we've got in fact Dorset's a unitary, we've got Surrey, East and West Sussex, so many county councils. We have now 2 MPs or more that we've got a great chance of gaining and using that momentum. And even where we only have 1 Lib Dem MP in a county, we can start to dominate that area, and that's really important. So it is this historic opportunity. But more than that, we can make a huge impact in our community. So I first stood as a county councillor after the county council in Surrey got rated the worst council in the country. And they got rated that because they were failing vulnerable children. Not sure if you remember the baby P story from Haringey. Absolutely tragic. You had a council in Haringey that had failed a vulnerable child and it died as a result. Thankfully that didn't happen in Surrey, but an inspector's report said it's only because of luck in your slightly affluent area, your services were letting down those vulnerable people. And that's the reason why I started to put my hat in the ring and stand, and it's led today. I was on the child protection register as a child, and so the fact that people that were growing up like me that could have been vulnerable and failed, I found appalling. Absolutely appalling. So you can make a real difference as either re-standing as a county councillor or standing in the first place. There are so many challenges facing local government, but particularly they face counties. And that's why we need good Liberal Democrats in there. Whether it's adult social care, whether it's special educational needs or children's social care. Those are the key challenges. I just want to give you a couple of stats of showing the scale. So the cost of providing special educational needs transport has more than doubled in the last 5 years. Counties are spending nearly a quarter, 25%, of their budget on children's social care. And 2/3 of their whole budget are spent on care. Not the stuff our residents think they spend their money on. It's not spent on highways, on libraries, and things that you feel are the key public facing sections, 2/3 of it. So a huge chunk of their money is spent on this. But actually, despite that increased spending, it's always been high, but it's shot up over the last couple of years. Despite that increased spending, as Lucy will tell you, services are just not good enough and they're failing vulnerable people. That's why we need Liberal Democrat councillors and hopefully councils turning round people's lives. Actually, there is some hope. The new government have quite a few arguments with them already. They are providing more devolution powers, particularly to counties. They're giving extra bus service powers to counties. So there is some hope there that does empower county councils. So we need to win these county council elections. We need to do so well. If we don't, MPs, when we come up for re-election, are in a lot more vulnerable position. So I feel we need to win them. And I want to talk about how we're going to win them. And it is by knocking on doors, delivering leaflets, and building your winning team. And this is a great chance to do that, particularly where you now have Liberal Democrat MPs. People want to be part of the winning team. They want to see that the MP is making a difference in Westminster, and you should make a difference in your community. Now, ALDC and the Liberal Democrat Campaigns Department are here to help. I know that because I've worked for both of them. They've helped me get elected and trained me up to be here now. And I hope you take on board their advice and implement it. You've got Kickstart coming up, which is a great thing to buy into, and so you can develop that plan with them. And by listening to their advice, you can make a huge impact to your community, and hopefully you're standing where I am as an MP in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very useful advice there. I'm now going to go over to Lucy, who's actually leading one of those councils that Will has just mentioned, which is Cambridgeshire. So we shall a different perspective.
Perspective, yes. Yes, so there's lots that Will has said that I completely agree with and remember quite vividly. And thinking back to where we were with those elections in 2021, it seems a weirdly different world to the world that we're living in now. And that my memory of those elections is fairly traumatic, actually, because we had been hoping to take control in Cambridgeshire County Council and making plans for that election for quite a long time. The way in which that election happened, we also have in Cambridgeshire, and I probably need to talk about this a bit more at some point, but we have a combined authority with a mayoral, we have a directly elected mayor who is elected on the same day as the county council elections. So we have always had this issue for the last 2 county council elections of running the county council elections at the same time as the mayor and combined authority elections, which adds a whole new layer of complexity on what is already a very complex set of elections, as Sarah outlined. And in 2021, all of that complexity was layered on top with dealing with COVID restrictions, which was a nightmare. So we had this plan that we were, of the election campaign we were hoping to run, and it got completely blown out of the water by the fact that no one was able to do anything that winter. We were all locked in our houses again, and it was absolutely gruesome. And all the way through the spring, there were these complicated things about who was allowed to go out, what you were allowed to do, and they kept the restrictions on door knocking a really, really long time, which clearly was very beneficial to the Conservatives, but absolutely really difficult for us. So they were an extraordinarily difficult set of elections. And the Conservatives were feeling very confident about them, and they simply couldn't believe that they hadn't won Cambridgeshire County Council. It was extraordinary to see how astonished they were that they had lost their majority. And their also complete assumption that even though they had lost the majority, they would be able to carry on running it. Because so we didn't take total control. The Conservatives were the largest party in Cambridgeshire, but there were 4 independents, 9 Labour councillors, and we had 22. I think I might get these numbers wrong. We had against them, all of those people were a majority of 5. So it was pretty tight running to start with, and the Conservatives immediately rang up the independents and the Labour group and told them that the other one had said that they would work with them, and therefore it was obvious that the Conservatives were going to be running the council. And my Labour colleague, who I know quite well and who the Conservative leader had been absolutely vile to for years, couldn't believe that they had rung her up and said, of course Labour will work with us, won't they? It was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, and it took them quite a long time to come to terms with the fact that they were not running the council. I don't think they still have. But they were a really tough set of elections, and it was also a very tough time to take over running a county council. County councils are large and complex organisations. One of the things that made taking over at Cambridgeshire both easier and more difficult was that our chief executive had announced the day before the elections that she was going to retire immediately after the election. So in some respects it was helpful that she had already said that, but it did mean that we were coming into running an organisation where the chief executive was on her way out. A vast number of staff were interims. There were vacant posts all over the place. The workforce was absolutely on their knees after trying to run the county council during COVID, which was an incredibly difficult time for all councils, and the NHS. But actually, counties had a huge role in that and had to manage some really difficult situations with care homes, and it was very, very tough on their staff. So it was a tough time to be taking over. And it was a tough group to be managing in some respects, kind of running a council with 3 groups, with a very, very lovely Lib Dem group, some of whom are here. Actually, I was really lucky in my Labour colleagues, and particularly in the leader of the Labour group on the county council, who I still get on really well with, despite some really difficult times during the course of our 3.5 years, and a group of independents who have also been quite difficult to work with at times. Keeping that together when you've only got a majority of 5 is quite hard work. And having to make the decisions that we have faced given the budgetary constraints and the difficulties. I mean, the financial pressure on county councils is extraordinary, and it continues to be extraordinary. We have a really difficult set of decisions to make this autumn for our budget for next year. The change of government is unlikely to change those dynamics very considerably. So those of you who are looking to take over control in councils, it's not going to be an easy thing to take over. And you're absolutely right, Will, about the fact that people do not realise how much of our budget goes at county level on social care. So 72% of our budget in Cambridgeshire goes on social care, which leaves not very much for everything else. So the state of our roads is the thing people care about enormously, but we have already got a £40 million budget gap to try and close for next year. The kind of banging on trying to say, are you going to fix our roads? Our roads are in a terrible state. We know they're in a terrible state. We are not going to be able to fix that. We are not going to be able to sort it out. We might manage to make it a little bit better, and we will tell people that we are putting money in and we are putting more money in. But we will not be able to do the things that, as a council and as campaigners, we would want to be able to do. We know perfectly well, as a campaign team, that the most important thing for us to do is to try and fix the potholes. I also know we cannot promise to do that. So that's going to be a difficult message to try and convey to those people who are out knocking on doors. You cannot promise that you're going to fix the potholes. We can't do it. We haven't got the money. What else was I going to say? Thinking about the things that we've achieved, the difference that having a Lib Dem-led council makes in comparison with a Conservative one. For me, the thing I'm most proud of, actually, in our past 3.5 years is the change of the culture at the council that we run. So, but it's a really difficult thing to try and get across to an ordinary voter how important that is. But Cambridgeshire County Council, when I took it over, there was such a culture of bullying and unpleasantness, and that's why we had almost no staff. Half of our social care jobs were filled by agency workers. The turnover in children's social care in particular was extraordinary. That is a terrible service for our people in Cambridgeshire. And turning that round and making it so that our social workers feel valued, our staff feel valued, they feel respected, is incredibly important, but it's not the kind of thing you can put on a leaflet. So it's quite hard to get that message across about that particular thing, which is the thing I probably feel most proud of, but is not something we're going to be able to talk about. More tangibly, one of the things I feel very proud of is that we have consistently, since coming in, continued with the free school meals vouchers for children for children who get free school meals. They have had a £15 voucher for every week during the holidays throughout the time that we've been running the council. That's a significant sum of money going into the pockets of the families in our area who absolutely need it most. You have to be on an incredibly low income to be entitled to free school meals. So being able to help those families, that is something that is quite tangible. We can put that on a leaflet. It is also the case that it's something that we can only say we've delivered for quite a small number of our residents. They are some of the most vulnerable of our residents, and I'm really proud that we've done that. And it is something we will talk about. I'm going to talk very, very quickly about the opportunities that we now have working with 72 MPs, which is amazing, and also the risk, because there's a real risk that some of our councillors think, oh, that's fantastic, we can tell everyone to write to their MP about this problem or that problem. And I need to tell them, no, don't do that. Your MPs will be swamped with all sorts of casework. If that's your casework, you deal with it. And also that it would be very helpful if our MPs didn't just tell everyone to write to the council in quite the same way. We need to work collaboratively together to try and use their voices in Parliament and the work that we do as a local council to support our residents together. And in some ways, there are brilliant ways in which we can use that as a campaigning tool, but we have to do it collaboratively, and that takes time and patience on both sides. In my region in the east of England, we have a really good example of how to do that, in that Chris White and St Albans and Daisy Cooper have been working really closely together on particularly how Daisy can use her role in Parliament to raise issues about care in the NHS which can then get picked up locally and work really effectively. But it is about working out how those messages work collaboratively together, rather than thinking, oh, that's somebody who can do that job for me. That's not going to work. So that's a really important thing that we need to manage as effectively as we can. If we can get it right, it will massively amplify the messages that we want to get across and enable us to fight the county elections on the ground that we choose and not the ground that Labour and the Conservatives choose. And that's such a difficult thing to do. Fingers crossed we can manage it. I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've really emphasised some of the difficulties, and I know, my heart's going out to you, because we've got those challenges and we're not in control. Yeah. You've got those challenges and you're in control, and that's really, really tough. Our next speaker is Alex from Shropshire. So a different perspective again.
Hello, also I'm Alex Wagner. I'm a Shropshire councillor and also the campaign manager up in North Shropshire. And I have to say, when I speak to people across the country at the moment, friends of mine down in Gloucestershire and Wiltshire and people who've got county elections coming up, I know it's early, I know we've just fought the election, but like we're excited, right? That's the buzz at the moment. Like, this is a good year to be fighting elections. And I've been reflecting on why it is that I think the counties feel a bit excited by this year, other than the obvious national context. And I think part of it is that we've all been through a kind of similar shared experience. 2021 was a COVID election, we had to fight incredibly hard. But 2017 wasn't exactly good fun, with Theresa May standing on the podium in the middle. Before my time, 2013 in the middle of the coalition, 2009 when Cameron had sorted out the Tories, 2005, 2001, 97 on election days. Like, you could not have contrived a worse cycle to be in than the cycle that Shropshire and I know a lot of other counties have been in, especially fighting the Tories in the countryside. Part of that experience, though, hasn't all been about losing and having these horrible county elections where we feel awful and, oh God, COVID, and oh God, general election, oh God, the rest of it. Part of it recently has been about winning. You look at the amount of Liberal Democrat MPs elected in the counties that we're fighting this time, some of them in areas where we've got almost no county councillors elected. In North Shropshire, we didn't win a single councillor last election, and we just won by 15,000. I mean, just on that, there is no way the Tories should have let that happen, right? The absolute mess they have created locally in Shropshire, but also nationally, to put off some of the voters they were putting off that were supporting the Lib Dems in seats like ours, it's incredible. It's a really seismic political shift. And though it is brilliant for us electorally, and, we've seen the reward of that, it does leave a fine mess for us to clean up. And, hearing what Lucy's had to say about Cambridgeshire, it is a bit of a ghost of Christmas future for Shropshire, I fear, if we do take control next May. On that, I think the combination of events, the sort of fighting these county elections in difficult years and having parliamentary elections that we've done really well in, kind of has built up a really good campaigning infrastructure in a lot of these seats. When I look at, again, friends of mine in Gloucestershire as an example, they're in such a good position compared to whether, the seats we have, the elections that we're going to win, the places we're fighting, the sort of wards we're targeting, awards which I think in previous years we might have written off in Shropshire. That's the case for probably half the county. Seats we've never really fought before, we're going to fight and we're going to win, and we think we will win, in fact. I think fighting elections in adversity makes for quite a fine campaigning pedigree. And I will embarrass Heather Kidd here in the front row, who has a larger majority in her division, a half share of the vote, than Vladimir Putin got in the last Russian presidential election. That's what fighting elections in adversity and doing well looks like, right? And I'm pretty sure there was no ballot stuffing going on in Cherbury. As a final point, I think an interesting twist to this, we're looking at Labour, and in my seat, I'm in Shrewsbury, which has just elected a Labour MP, the only one in our county area. Though it's easy to look at that and go, they're going to have this campaigning infrastructure, maybe you're in a county where Labour have just won one of the seats and, maybe have the nearby town or whatever. I don't fear them. I actually think that it's going to be a really demotivated Labour Party, especially in rural areas where you've got these small local Labour branches that are frankly one or two or three people, and the only candidates they stand are the people that they can twist the arm of on the odd paper. We lost 8 divisions in North Shropshire last election by under 200 votes. A lot of those wards had Labour Party candidates in them. A lot of those Labour Party candidates took 100 or 200 votes. I actually think that there's going to be an impact in areas where Labour have just been absolutely thrashed and where we've become the obvious tactical alternative to the Conservative Party, where Labour are really going to struggle to find those candidates. Who's going out and doing it? You can probably think of that Labour Party person in your area who might be the one twisting the arms, who might be going out and getting paper candidates on ballots. I can't see it happening on the same scale as the last few elections this time. I actually think it's going to be a noticeable shift. A demoted Labour Party as well as a demotivated Conservative Party. So, concluding, we want to win areas we've not considered winnable up and down the country in these county elections. We've just done it in the parliamentary elections, so it must be possible. But I think from our unique perspective in Shropshire, we feel like we need to do it. You know, for our county, it's where we live, it's what we care about, for our residents. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, our local Conservatives are pretty awful, they've made a bit of a bodge of running the council, well, all I'll say is, as long as you'll deliver some focuses, I'll pay you train fare or petrol to come to Shropshire, our Tories will give you a run for their money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, in this bit of it, we're going to John from Lancashire, where I guess, unlike the rest of us, you're fighting Labour.
Well, actually, one of the things I'm going to talk about, and I never do this, folks, my election next year is so complicated. This is the chart of all the various kind of scenarios I had to kind of piece together, and I had to write it down because there'll be lots of seats like mine where it's not a clear path. There's not an obvious opposition. So just to make it simple for you, so there's only 2 of us on Lancashire County Council out of nearly 90 councillors. And that's because we got, as Alex has alluded to, it has been a fairly rotten cycle for Lancashire County Council. And Lancashire County Council is also a hyper-marginal county which flips between Tory and Labour. But what we're having to consider, so think about the seats we're going to be contesting in the Preston part of Lancashire. We now have a Preston Labour run council, a Lancashire Tory run council. All our seats are generally Tory facing but now have a Labour MP in a county that Labour are hoping to take back from the Tories. So all that brings a level of uncertainty to it, and that's before you start getting into things like reform and Greens and independents that will be popping up. So the way I've got to do it, and myself and Charles at the back there, who are the campaign and comms officers here for ALDC, and thank you for Will for plugging Kickstart that happens in November, because I really recommend you getting your teams there and getting a plan together, because just some of these scenarios, because what happens if the Tories bounce back? You know, I actually agree with Alex. I think it's going to be a brilliant year for us to do it. In fact, a golden opportunity for us to do it with the Tories still in shambles and Labour's honeymoon has already gone after 2 weeks. But we have to assume that these good looks do not last. You have to assume that this is going to be as tough as what it was in 2021. And in Lancashire, one guy lost in Morecambe, having increased his vote by 1,000 votes, but lost by 3. In Burnley, we lost our last seat by 5, and in Cllr we lost our seat by 12. So we were 20 votes in total of actually gaining in 2021, but that Tory vote was huge, was massive, that COVID vaccine bounce they got. So we have to prepare for that. We have to prepare for actually, whoever the Tories pick, they get a honeymoon period out of it. We have to accept that maybe Labour get their act together, and you might be thinking, oh well, those new Labour MPs, yes, that's a real risk, but they haven't done much yet. It's not just the MPs, it's their money and their staff that they've now got. And one thing's for absolutely sure. So in the seat I actually contested in the general election, Ribble Valley, which holds a lot of the northern suburbs of Preston, which we are hoping to take historically off the Tories, they are not just going to sit back and let us take that. Because they won that general election seat by 500 votes. They know they've got to reinforce it. Now, they might be rubbish, and they might be reckless, and they might be overconfident, but I can't control that. I can only control what we do. And so we are preparing for the toughest fight of our life, and if we get it an easier run, then we win better. But we will win either way. And that's what you guys have got to do. You've got to plan, get organised, and get out on the doors and win it by Christmas. If you're not campaigning now, you're already late. If you're not campaigning by Christmas, you've probably left it too late. We are absolutely ruthless, and we have to admit, I know there's a few people here from Lancashire, there are parts of Lancashire that will not they'll have a candidate and nothing else. You know, I think of places like Wyre, which is right next to Preston, they had 1 candidate out of 50 in the last locals. You have to be ruthless, you have to target, you have to think, okay, where can we win? Because you don't want 3 seats losing by a total of 20. You want to gain those seats, and to that you've got to be ruthless, and you've got to tell people who might be a little bit excited by the general election, actually, you've got to earn your win. Nothing comes free and easy for Lib Dems, and next year will be no difference, but it can and it should be a brilliant year, so we've got to go out and do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I say, I never cease to be impressed with Preston and just how hard you work. Because you're working
every year. I'd like a year off.
I know. So just a couple of thoughts from me, and then we'll open it up. I think you've heard from the panel. We have a huge opportunity next May, and it's right when you started going back over the different years. Actually, I've been a county council for nearly 30 years, and you're right. Every 4 years we've had some against a general election, COVID, and all the rest of it. So this should be our best opportunity, but it's not going to come to us on a plate. What happened in July, when there was this huge anti-Tory vote across the whole country, and people like Will and lots of others got elected, come next May, you're fighting individual Tory county councillors or Labour county councillors in their own divisions, where they're known, they may well be liked, they may well be very popular, and actually it's a very different scenario. So think about that. There's just over 7 months to go to polling day, which is not very long. How many of you have selected all your county council candidates? Who's in the process of selecting? Yeah.
And there's still some hands that didn't go up.
Yeah, and then, yeah. So if you haven't started, you really do need to get on with it. And there's some very useful advice on the ALDC website, all about how to approve and then select councillors. So get your... As I said earlier, the county council elections are really difficult because you've got lots of different local parties all coming together. So if you haven't got a coordinating group, get a coordinating group in place. In Warwickshire, we've gone from all the MPs being Tory bar one to now all the MPs are not Tory bar one. So for them, we've got 42 Tory county councillors out of 57. Last time, the Tories just wiped the floor with everybody else. So they've got a lot to defend. They've got a lot to worry about as well, all over the county. And you're right, you have Labour MPs wanting to make a mark. One Lib Dem MP now, fantastic, wanting to make a mark. So it's all there's huge things to play for, but it will not just fall into our laps. We have to plan for it, fundraise for it, get those leaflets out, get that door knocking done, and really put everything into getting stuff done coming up to May. Otherwise, people are going to be disappointed. And there's nothing worse than working really, really hard and then coming out and being disappointed. And finally, just before I start to bring a kickstart, it's a really good opportunity to bring, last weekend in November, to bring your disparate groups together across your county, bring them together, get them in a room together, get them planning, and have a day before, have a planning day before. That's what Warwickshire's planning to do. Have a day before, get your teams together, get your candidates together, think about your manifesto, think about what your plan is. Half a day doing that is absolutely going to pay absolute dividends next May.
I'm going to do two of those points. One is about, I think, fighting the Greens and also generally where we're up against. I agree with the point that I think all politicians are going to be really unpopular. For me, I think stripping it back even beyond before leaflets and canvassing and stuff, we do need to think quite carefully about what we're putting on literature. So like, local credibility and a clear tactical message is important to establish yourself as the challenger to the status quo in your area. But actually, the best message, voters don't care about politics, I suppose is my fundamental supposition. They're not interested in politics. They're quite interested in local issues and where they live in their community and what's going on. And so actually, before you're even planning a campaign, I tend to think the campaigns I've been involved in that have made really big gains in unlikely areas have done so on specific concerted campaigning on local issues as a genuine grassroots campaign. So just as a point about fighting particularly the Greens, we have beaten the Greens in Green Oswestry lately in by-elections. We've done that because they just talk about politics and we talk about issues people care about. It's the same way we beat the Tories and Labour. I'm afraid there's no cheat code. We didn't do anything more environmental either. We just did proper local politics better than they did.
Okay, Will.
So I'll be brief. Lucy has the toughest job on the panel because she's running a county council. I feel I have the busiest job on the panel, having seen my diary for conference and afterwards. But Lucy, no doubt, has the toughest job. And I think we've got to be realistic. It is tough to run a county council at the best of times, let alone these tough situations. But in a tough situation, don't you want Liberal Democrats that are both caring and competent? Yeah. Or do you want the Conservatives that are neither? And that is a stark choice. That even though we can't fix everything in one term, I think we need to keep reminding voters of that, competent and caring, and they will come towards us. There was a question about targeting. Obviously, our general election strategy was completely spot on. Quite cautious, but then you adapt to the times based on what your resources are. So you don't target the 50% of the seats because you just want to win a council if you don't have the resources. So build up your resources. Your targeting has got to be based on your resources, but adapt to the political situation. So there is no hard and fast rule, but if you haven't built a team, you can't expect to take advantage of a good political wind if you've got, because you can't, as an MP, I certainly can't campaign on my own, but even in a division where there's roughly 12,000 voters in each county council seat, you need a team to get to people. And finally, with the Greens, which I'd add from the MP's perspective, Greens have now got 4 MPs in Parliament, and Parliament is a place where you can hold each other to account. You intervene in speeches and debates. I've started to do that already. And as a councillor, you never do that. It's a different sort of thing. The level of scrutiny, both in the chamber and outside the chamber, the Greens will receive will be more than they've ever done before. And I think that will start to expose some of their weaknesses. The Greens co-leader is opposing renewable energy and pylons from it in his own constituency, in Suffolk. And that level of scrutiny will expose that, because a lot of the Greens are, quite frankly, NIMBYs. They have always opposed new train lines, and they are now, and their co-leader is opposing renewable energy and the infrastructure to support it. That scrutiny that they've now got, I appreciate some people might think they've now got some momentum, but that scrutiny will be really tough for them, because of that duplicity.
Lucy.
Thank you. Just to respond on the point about the difficult job, it is a really difficult job. It is also a job that I am incredibly privileged to do, and it makes a real difference to people's lives every day. The job I have enjoyed in politics that I probably enjoyed the most was being in the European Parliament, which was the most incredible privilege. But this one, I feel I make a difference to the lives of particularly vulnerable residents in Cambridgeshire every day, and that is so worth doing. So it really is worth getting Liberal Democrats elected to county councils, because actually the decisions we make, and the most important decision that my council have probably made over the last 3 years is to put council tax up every year, which our predecessors did not do. And while that's not necessarily, again, a brilliant thing to put on the leaflets, my goodness, it makes a difference to the level of services we can offer, and our public services are on their knees. So please do go out and try and elect more people to do my difficult job, because it is a massive privilege and it makes a difference to real people in their real lives. Not that yours doesn't, sorry. On the how do we get people to vote Liberal Democrat point, which I think was the first question, I think that's a really, really important question for us to think about coming into these elections, because the general election really was about everyone voting to get rid of the Tories. And now they've done that, there is this kind of potentially slight vacuum in the national debate. And one of my other roles in the party is that I sit on the Federal Policy Committee. I'm the Vice Chair of the Federal Policy Committee. I was very proud of our manifesto. And actually, our manifesto has some really, really important policies in it that our new parliamentary team, I hope, will continue to campaign on. You can, if you really want to, sum up our general election campaign as NHS care, sewage. None of those issues have gone away. And while there was quite a lot of fun had falling into rivers and things, the key messages there about the importance of our care system and the absolute decimation of our rivers and streams and coastal areas, those are really critical issues for us to carry on campaigning on. And I think we need to now build on the success that we've had in the general election to keep those messages at the front of our campaigning and at the front of the national consciousness. And on the care message in particular, I think there's a real readiness out there for people to listen. I think that there is a real sense that actually a lot of people understand that we're not going to be able to fix the NHS unless we fix social care. And Labour at the moment do not seem to have an answer for that. And there was an answer in our manifesto. So we need to keep talking about that, and going into the county elections is a really good time to do it.
John, would you just like to... We've got about 13 minutes left.
Yes, I'll be
so
quick.
can you mention quickly Kickstart?
Yeah, right.
And then I'm hoping to take another few
I've got my
quick
point.
questions.
Firstly, what Kickstart is, it's a bespoke training weekend dedicated to getting you elected. You'll have bespoke training, expert advice, bespoke to what your needs are going forward, because as I mentioned before, all of us will have slightly different kind of ways forward. Do go to the stand, do get yourself booked on, do get that discount. It will be really worthwhile. I did it back in... Oh my, I've been councillor for so long now. I think I did it in 2007, and it was instrumental to us then going on, me becoming a councillor, and some of the people that mentored me, I'm still good friends with now, and are still that ear I speak to when I need to help on issues. I've got to quickly draft through everything. Knowing where to target, okay. It's about playing the odds really with your election. Yes, there'll be some people who win having never knocked a door, but you are less likely to. There are some people who win who don't do postal vote recruitment, but you're less likely to. So I am particularly brutal with my people. If you don't prove you are working, then you don't get additional support. And the way you do that, and the easiest way and the best way you could track it, is by Connect. And we say, if you haven't got a 5 to 10% of your electorate as a new voter ID contact by Christmas, you can't prove if you're going to win that seat. You might win it by luck, you might win it by not doing everything right, but you don't know that, and so you've got to prove to me that you're worth that extra resource. So give them the opportunity to prove it, and if they don't, then that's your answer. That might be quite ruthless, and if people don't like that, I am that ruthless. But message to Tories. I've been out on the doors every week since the general election. That Tory bounce back has not happened. And what's interesting is those moderate Tories are looking for somewhere to go, and that's why I mentioned about the risk of Reform, Independents, Greens. And some of the survey responses we're getting back are remarkable. They'll say, who did you vote for in the general? Labour, to get rid of the Tories. Who are you going to vote for in the locals? Lib Dem, Green or Reform? And it's consistent. But what you're going to say, and I apologise to Lucy who's in control here, most of us are not in that bridge. If the Tories are doing an absolute awful job of your roads, attack them for it. If the Tories haven't built that school like they haven't in my patch, the classic case, they had 39 million to spend on school infrastructure, they spent 5 million on it. I'm sorry, they're getting attacked for that. Don't be shy about throwing punches and saying the Tories are terrible, because they're not going to say it. We have to, and they shouldn't be rewarded by us not being on the front foot. Casework, Alex has talked about some of the stats, but one thing I will say to Lib Dems, loads of Lib Dems are brilliant at casework. Less Lib Dems are good at telling people that they're good at casework. I can't remember who said it. If you do something, put it on a bit of paper and put it through people's doors. There you go. Thank you very much. But it was true then, it's true now. You being brilliant but nobody knowing means Tories win. You being brilliant and everyone knowing, you're more likely to win. So casework is important, but telling people is also important.
The potholes thing, my goodness, I know far more about the detail of how to fill potholes than I probably ought to. But there are some issues to do with just competence, which so the whole manage the contract thing that Sarah said in response is a really key part of that. And one of the other things that we've had to do is to look really carefully at the contract that the county council, the previous Conservatives, signed with Milestone, our big contractor. Who were completely taking the piss in how they were filling some of those contracts, and also there was no mechanism within the county council to check whether the work that they said they'd done had actually been done. So there are some really basic competence things where actually, even though we are not going to be able to fix and fill every pothole in the county, we will make the money go better and spend it better. And in your case, probably if they've filled it 4 times, they need to look at the wider road and do a larger patch. Sorry for the boring details. That stuff on the boring details probably comes back to what we have to say about the funding, the funding issue. So there are huge strategic, systemic problems with social care. There's also just stuff about competence, and Liberal Democrats are quite good on competence. So I'd go for that.
Yeah. Will.
So I'll talk about local government funding. The Lib Dems for years have said local government is not adequately funded. We need to highlight that's what we said at the election, and that's what we've been saying for decades, because we've been right. And the key part of that is social care, which obviously Ed has really led on. But we as a country, as a society, we haven't saved for people's older age. We have got a sort of a ticking time bomb there. We need to have a cross-party consensus to solve social care. And then by doing that, you not only solve council finance, but you solve the NHS as well. Yeah. Keep on repeating that message is so important. That's one of the reasons why we've got 72 MPs, because we've touched a sort of a real nerve with voters of they get that we get it, that this is that issue. Council tax is fundamentally broken and unfit. The fact that we pay council tax based on the value of our properties in the early 90s, no revaluation, no based on ability to pay. There's obviously started to be rumours that the government might get rid of the single person discount, which we don't like at all. So that really highlights there is something wrong here. And then finally, business rates. Most business rates that are paid for in a local area get taken away by the government. You don't see the benefits of a new business growth. You don't see the benefit of what's going on in your town. These are things that we've talked about for years. So repeat that winning message for us.
Alex?
I think with campaigning on issues like that and taking control is the pothole comment. There's a campaigning triangle. You talk to people in your community and you figure out what the issues are. You try and take action on it and do the casework and do something about it. You put it in a bit of paper and stick it through someone's letterbox, letting them know what you're trying to do about it. Whether you're a backbencher, whether you're a leader, whether you're in cabinet, whatever the case, I think that triangle is absolutely the case. You know, I'm not the Prime Minister of Shrewsbury, I'm a councillor, right? I'm going to do what I can on the issues people raise with me. If we take control next May, if I'm in cabinet, whatever the case, I'm going to still be doing that. I wouldn't be self-conscious about it. And usually, as Lucy says, the Tories are pretty rubbish at running councils, so I wouldn't worry about the fact that we'd be better.
One of the key things that made a difference for us in 2021 was finding that there were some things that the Conservatives had done which were not just incompetent, they were borderline corrupt. Yeah. And those were shocking. There are likely to be other things like that around, and do dig them out and publicise them.
And use the officers. I mean, we're lucky in Warwickshire, we have a good relationship with the Chief Executive, but ask for a briefing. Get officers, senior officers to come along and on a confidential basis and actually find out what's going on. Keep an eye on the briefings on the budget, etc. You know, do a bit. And if you've got county councils already, that's a really helpful thing to do. So we're literally about 30 seconds off the end. Thank you hugely to the panel. If you could thank the panel in the usual way or another.